Just came home from the It Marathon where they played part 1 and 2 back to back, and I was really disappointed. I had hope going in, and so did others that joined me in the theater. They had two people dress up as Pennywise and Georgie. It really got my hopes up that this one was going to be just as good as the first, if not better. Even though in the back of my head I already knew I was probably going to be disappointed because of one major thing. And boy, am I severely disappointed. If you're like me, you've seen the first It miniseries and thought it was entertaining and scary at times. If you saw part 1 of the remake, you know it upped the scares and upped the comedy. That was fine. I loved that. I have it on Blu-ray. This second part basically downgrades the scares and ups the comedy more, where I felt like I was watching a Marvel movie with horror elements. I never really felt like there was anything at stake here. The story is good, but there's simply too much comedy to a point where they make more jokes than Scary Movie does. Makes more jokes than an advertised horror movie. Seriously, watch the trailer. The trailer does not reflect at all what the movie is going to be. The trailer makes the movie look like it's going to be scary, but the movie isn't scary at all. It's more comedy than scares. The way they marketed made you feel like it was going to be a horror film. The way it's shown makes it look like it's exclusively a horror film, not a comedy. It's like Marvel made a horror movie, but forgot it was supposed to be scary when marketed to be scary. Have you learned nothing from Batman v Superman, Warner Brothers? Or did you just see that Shazam was a pretty good success and decide all movies should have jokes every 2 minutes for a runtime of almost 3 hours long? Before I keep ranting about this, let's just start the review. Now, what I feared most about the movie was the power dynamic being shifted and it effectively ruining itself. Guess what? That happened. In part 1, the characters are vulnerable, weak kids. But in part 2, they are all grown up and at least 3 characters look tougher and larger than Pennywise himself, which is probably why they aren't shown alongside each other very often. The kids had a vulnerability that made you scared for them, since Pennywise was so much larger and stronger in the form. I'm immediately going to dive into the story with spoilers, so skip to this point if you don't want to get the movie spoiled for you. The movie picks up immediately after part 1 ended, and we see a gay couple at a carnival that get picked on by guys half their size and get the shit kicked out of them. One of them gets eaten by Pennywise, and Mike picks up on this and starts summoning the pack. They all say their goodbyes and go, except for Stan, who kills himself. If you saw the miniseries or read the book, you knew this was going to happen, and it seems they treat you like you knew already, since they didn't really make a big deal out of this. So the characters don't remember what happened when they were kids in Derry, and at the dinner table at a Chinese restaurant, they get told through a clever use of fortune cookies what happened to Stan. Sadly, they ruin this with needless humor and the restaurant personnel not reacting realistically to what happened at all. If you hear a guy scream, "It's not real," over and over while beating the table with a chair with his eyes closed, what would you do? Walk in calmly and ask, "Is everything okay?" To which Richie replies, "Yeah, check please." Now, this comedy came directly after the scares, and if all the scares would work like that, where the comedy came after, I would probably not be as mad, but this wasn't the way everything worked. A lot of the times, the humor came during the scares, even in the climax, which we're gonna get to in a little bit. It just makes so light of the life-threatening situations that the characters are in that I honestly never feel scared for them anymore, because they make a joke out of it. So they get told they all have to get a relic of their childhood by Mike, whom shows Bill how Indians dealt with it when it first came to be. And it shows pretty well how they're supposed to get rid of him. So they all have to go their separate ways and get visions of the past, how the clown scared them. Here's a problem. The scares They're good, but there's no real tension or consequence for these scares since we already know the character that relives them gets to live into their 40s. So, yeah, going into the flashback, I know there's going to be a scare, but I also know that the character's going to live. Now, how you could have made this better is simply by seeing the character watch Pennywise kills another kid. I mean, then at least there's legitimately going to be a death, and, you know, you could go crazy with that idea, but no, he just scares the main character a little bit. I'm guessing these scenes were just in there to meet the scare quota and reference. And speaking of Marvel, they literally do a cameo thing where Stephen King himself makes a cameo as a minor character. Now, this could be the scene where you could appropriately bring in more comedy, but they only shove in 2 jokes and they move on. You see, this is the problem. Where you can build on here, you can make the jokes, and then you go back to the story and the scary stuff. But there's more jokes than there's scares, and there's more jokes than there is story. It just doesn't work. But there's 2 scenes in particular that I thought worked really well. And guess what? They're all over the marketing. It's where the little girl chases the firefly and Pennywise catches it. And it's the scene in the House of Mirrors. Now, I'm not saying that these were made to be trailer bait, but it sure as hell looked like it. And they did not shy away from using it for that. The bully character also makes a return and gets set free by Pennywise looking like one of his henchmen, and even drives the car that he used to own, looking like said henchman, but decomposed. Where his reveal was scary, they make him into a comic relief character within the span of 4 minutes. This is a problem. You introduce a scary looking creature and make it look like a parody where he drives off in a car with the main bully sitting next to him. Kinda as if it's a buddy cop movie, but one of them is a zombie. What the hell? So after they all get the scares happen to him, so they all have their artifacts along with Stan's artifact carried by Eddie, and they start to go after the clown. They enter the house, and after a scare with some pretty effective CGI where Stan's head becomes a spider creature that attacks the cast, only to lead them into the well and start the climax of the movie. And this is where I had hoped they would drop the comedy, but they absolutely did not. Throughout the entire climax, they kept throwing one-liners, putting even Deadpool to shame. After they burned their relics and did as they assumed was going to end the clown, one part was purposefully left out by Mike. They were going to die as part of the ritual. Pennywise turns into a large spider ant creature with his clown head on it, and this is where the CGI starts to look pretty bad. And he starts chasing the cast, whom get thrown into a separate dimension or something for a bit, where they experience personal scares to which they have to break free from. Pennywise impales Eddie, whom starts to explain to the gang how he felt empowered when he faced his past fear with his newfound bravery, where Pennywise got to be vulnerable and small. To which the gang realizes what they did in the first movie, that if they believe in something that will harm it, that it actually works and harms him. You see, when you're not scared of him, that's how you get him. And I wish they did more with this. They just start calling the Pennywise a clown or downplay the fears they themselves had to face when they were a kid by calling him a little old lady, or they just keep screaming, "Clown, you're a clown," at him. Until he eventually looks like a small ugly baby with a fast beating heart, which the gang crushes and finally kill it. And this took the movie almost 3 hours to reach in just part 2. So all in all, after that they do a closing speech where Stan sent everyone a letter explaining he was too afraid to come back, so he thought killing himself was the best way to go about it, since if they weren't a complete gang, it wouldn't have worked. If during my explanation it sounded like I didn't include a lot of the comedy, it's because I forced it out of my system. I laughed during the comedy bits, they were funny, but also during the scenes that were supposed to be scary. The climax where they there were clearly a scene meant to be menacing was instead laughed at by the entire theater. Honestly, you could just make it to be your headcanon that they did kill Pennywise in part 1 and that part 2 never happened, and it would be a better ending. Let your imagination fill in the blanks. Having part 1 and 2 play back to back only confirmed to me that if this was done in reverse, where the adults first faced Pennywise and us not knowing who or what he is, and finding out throughout the movie how powerful he truly can be, and then have the offspring of the first movie's main characters have to face him. That would work so much better. First we get to know him through the eyes of an adult, and then tiny children would have to face him. All in all, if this was marketed as the horror comedy it was, I probably would still be mad. But since I was expecting a horror movie and that wasn't what I got, I was majorly disappointed. As for the rating, this movie gets a 4 out of 10. Remove the comedy to make it an 8 out of 10, but as it stands, it's a 4. That's a review. Bye.